So Challengers is a movie that was supposed to come out in the fall of 2023. However, it was delayed because of the writers and actor strike of the summer of last year. Obviously, I think the studio, Amazon, MGM, they would like their stars and their filmmakers to be able to promote their movie properly. And so they decided to go ahead and punt this movie into the spring 2024 season. And it's been heavily anticipated. I mean, Zendaya, obviously a huge star, has so much star power behind her. But not only that, the marketing for this movie was interesting to say the least. It definitely painted the picture of what would be a love triangle. There was definitely some sexiness and some steaminess in the trailer. You throw a Rihanna song on top of that, and it had all the makings to be a very popular film. And also, if you follow filmmakers, Luca Guadagnino, very well respected and established filmmaker who's made some very interesting projects previously, coming back once again with this brand new film. So it had a lot going for it. It also had a lot of pretty positive feedback and reception after it made its premiere earlier this year for a few people to see. And so we got a chance to check this movie out this past weekend. And so with all of that out the way, man, I will pass it over to you. What do you think about this new film, Challengers?
To put it quite plainly, Challengers is crazy. What did I watch? I have no idea what I watched. No, this movie is absolutely nuts. I actually had to convince one of my boys who was probably listening to this podcast that like sports movies most often is not about the sports. It's always about the drama, and they use sports as a vehicle. And he was like, I don't know if I want to see it. He left the theater and he had a good time, as I expected him to. But Challengers, man. Again, this movie is about a tennis player turned coach named Tashi. And she has taken her husband and transformed him into a world-renowned, famous Grand Slam champion. But in order to get him out of his recent losing streak, she signs him up for a Challenger event, which is an event that they have in order to get into the U.S. Open. But at the Challengers event, he ends up facing off against his former best friend and Tashi's former boyfriend. Messy, nothing but messiness. So this movie it plays with everything you expect it to play with. Like you said, this is really about this love triangle at the top of it all, and Zendaya is the puppet master, manipulating these two guys, and it's just such an interesting movie. Because what's funny is while I was watching it, listen to the episode before this, but I actually thought about Wolverine, Jean Grey, and Cyclops. I was like, this is ridiculous. What is going on in this film? But there's a lot of things I think to like about this film. One is the energy that you can constantly feel in any situation in this movie. I think there's a very Luca Guadagnino, I can never say his name. He does a very good job of this, just having this ambiance in every room that's both awkward and something that you're forced to chew on. It's like I have to watch this thing even though it's awkward. So I love that he's able to do that. Also within this movie, there is tennis play, but within the tennis play, there's a lot of cool cinematography too. There's a lot of back and forth. There's moments you're the tennis racket. There's moments you're the tennis ball from the camera's point of view. There's moments it's just really cool. There's also a sequence in the third act when it comes to cinematography that they're taking swings. I can't even really articulate what was happening completely because I would have to like watch it back again. But they're doing a lot of cool things cinematically here to keep you, I think, engaged in the story. That's kind of beyond just the dialogue. So I appreciate the movie for, I think, doing those things, because there was a couple moments where I was like, I don't know what's going on, but this is cool. Like this shot is really cool. So I appreciate that. Something else, I think about the film, one thing I don't like too much is the pacing. I think by the end, not even the end of it, there's just moments throughout the film I could find myself being like, we're still here, or should we still be here? And I feel like I shouldn't always have to ask that question. But it's a long one. And I think by the end of it, I was like, I feel like we could have shaved like 15 minutes personally. I was like, 15 minutes would be a good amount of time to shave off this movie. But man, what a weird movie. What a fun time. I think between this love triangle, these three actors were doing tremendous. One of the things I've seen online though, that beyond Zendaya, the two guys, a lot of girls actually have come out and said like, I wish those two guys were hotter. And I think that's funny. I think that's really funny commentary. I was like, okay. That's funny. But overall, Challengers, man, a very interesting movie. It's really weird to talk about kind of without spoiling it. But there's so much here that I think happens between the two male leads that you don't always necessarily see between Zendaya and the other two male leads. Like the two male leads very much have a chemistry. They have like this sexual tension, but they never buy into it. And I think that what's funny is those parts of the film though were usually more interesting for me versus Zendaya when she's interacting with the other two individually. It worked, don't get me wrong, but it was something about the chemistry between the other two that's like, whoa, what's going on here? And so I think that was something I enjoyed in the movie, was just like the weird tension between those two. But yeah, overall, Challengers is weird, but it's a good movie. I like the tension. I like the situation they're in. I remember somebody asked me like, what do you think of the movie? I'm like, really? It's just a fucked up situation. And it's really weird. And some people have these weird and complex relationships. And I think that's really what it's about. Not only that, but when they say this movie is about tennis, it's such a big metaphor for what's happening, as Zendaya is quite literally playing tennis with two real human beings, and she gets off of it. And that's really what it feels like the movie is about, is these three different people who get off on tennis in different ways, and what that looks like. So yeah, I enjoyed myself. A little bit too long, but Challengers, man, I can't wait to talk to more people about it. It's a really interesting film, I think, to talk to people about.
So Luca Guadagnino, he's one of the more interesting filmmakers working right now. I certainly make it a point to see all of his movies, and I think that a lot of his films, he's certainly coming to be a master of films that are characterized by eroticism and romance and sexual energy, from A Bigger Splash to Call Me By Your Name, which very much has a lot of sexual energy in it, to even something that is like a romantic thriller in Bones and All. He certainly loves to lean into what eroticism and romance can look like, but also how that can sometimes bring the worst traits out of people. And he very much leans into that heavily within Challengers. And ultimately, this movie, Challengers, is 2+ hours of messy love triangles, hurt feelings, sex, big sensual energy, and I think some really, really incredible tennis sequences. It's simultaneously a sports movie, a tennis movie, a love triangle movie, and even more so thematically, it's a movie that's filled with deceit and betrayal, with each of the three leads, Tashi, Patrick, and Art, constantly undermining each other at every turn that they get. So it's consistently an examination about, I think, these three broken people who do some very, very questionable stuff to each other, and ultimately how these three people feel like they're addicted to each other. They feel like that they have an addiction to be in each other's lives. And it's toxic. It's extremely toxic, because they all move in certain precarious ways that just consistently draw them back to each other. And they've ended up in this incredibly messy situation to where this movie and the framing of this movie gives us a dual timeline. One end of the story is following the tennis match between Patrick and Art. This is very much a showdown that's been 13 years in the making. And then the rest of the movie is filling in the gaps, showing us how over the course of those 13 years, the relationship between these three, how it starts, how it evolved, how it eventually crumbles before them, and where it leads to the end of this movie. And I think that when you have a pretty intelligent and confident filmmaker like Guadagnino behind the camera, who knows exactly how messy these characters are, and he knows how messy this situation is, he leans into that. I think that some of this movie has a little bit of camp to it, and it has a lot of these moments of eroticism, and ultimately, this is kind of a movie of moments for me that I really, really enjoy and love, because it's giving us something that we don't typically experience in a film where, yes, the story is there and there's certainly meaning and depth to the characters, but a lot of these moments kind of become bigger than the movie itself. And I find it very, very similar to what we saw with Saltburn this past fall. You know, there's a sequence in this movie where Patrick and Art are eating churros, and it might be the most sensual sequence in the movie. That's it's like, there's a lot going on here beyond these two just eating churros. And there's also a sequence of Zendaya dancing in this movie, and we pretty much hear the entirety of Hot in Here by Nelly. Like, we hear the whole song. It just plays out, and Zendaya just dances and dances and dances. And it becomes this big moment in the movie where it's like, wow, we're still listening to this and we're still watching her. And I think she even recognizes it, because if you go on social media, all of her profile pics are of her dancing from that scene right now. They know that this is a big moment. This is going to be a big moment on social media, on TikTok. Yeah. It'll be a meme. And I think that works in its favor, because this is a movie to get people talking. And this is a movie that's going to make you feel a certain type of way. And it's also going to make you choose sides, I think, in this dynamic between these three. Of course, Zendaya is the superstar of the three. And so she's presented front and center, not only narratively, but in the marketing. But I honestly think the real standout in this movie is Josh O'Connor. He's the one that does a lot in this movie. And I don't necessarily think the movie works without his performance and just the depths that he has to go to, because you simultaneously question this guy, but you also root for him because he is a bit of an underdog. And I think that he does tremendous work, and I'm not really surprised. He's in The Crown. He's really, really great in that show as Prince Charles. He won an Emmy. So I knew that he had the caliber and the quality from a performance standpoint to really kind of carry a lot of this on his shoulder. But these three characters are really playing such different people. You know, there is an element of obsession there, and obviously tennis being the sport that's at the center of this movie, it becomes a focal point to where it impacts and changes all of their lives in very different ways. And Zendaya, sort of as the centerpiece, her character Tashi, she is consistently confronted with things that she actually wants and things that she actually desires versus the things that she settles for and the things that actually progress and advance her career to the levels that she wanted to gain and to get to. And so that creates this weird and crazy dynamic as well. And so I think that this movie's doing quite a lot from a thematic standpoint, but then also just from a memorable standpoint. Like, this is going to have a lot of memorable sequences that people talk about, and it's going to be divisive. I don't think that everybody's going to love this movie. I mean, even if you look at the cinema score now, it only has a B+, but then if you go on Letterboxd, everybody loves it. It's going to create that divisive reaction, which to me, this is another example of why that's a good thing, to get people talking, because this is meant to elicit emotional responses. This is meant to make you feel a certain type of way. And I think it's meant to get you to think just about everybody and the choices that they make here, because all of the characters, all three of them, Tashi, Patrick, and Art, they're kind of worms, and they move in very, very weird, questionable ways. But you also kind of empathize with their positions as well. They all deal with stuff that they have to sort of overcome throughout the course of the story. So it won't be necessarily a movie that everybody loves, but it's definitely full of its memorable moments and full of really, really tremendous performances. Beyond that, the tennis sequences are incredible. I've never seen anything like that in this movie, just the way that they're shot, the way that they're conceived. They often feel like how a boxing match would feel on the big screen. That's how the tennis sequences are presented here, which I thought was a really clever choice. I love the score. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. The score and the music in this movie is so memorable. This is some shit that you can dance to in a club. There were even sequences where the score kind of drowned out some of the dialogue. I couldn't really make out what some characters were saying, but it was so good that I didn't mind that. I thought that was kind of the point. Like, yeah, this is really meant to be vibes. This is just meant to be energy. Like, focus on that as opposed to the dynamic and the interaction between these two. And last thing I'll point out, without giving it away, there is a moment of... So there's this trope called Chekhov's gun in narrative storytelling, where every element that's a part of a script, that's a part of a story, is meant to mean something. If it's not meaningful to the story, then you got to get rid of it. So if you introduce a gun in the first act of a story, well, by the end of that story, somebody better be using that gun. And they use something in this script in the first act that comes back in the third act, which is so fucking brilliant. It's one of the best uses of Chekhov's gun that I've seen in a real long time. I did not see it coming, and when it happened, it was like, holy shit, that was incredible. I loved it. You got to see the movie to figure out exactly what that is. But overall, I really, really enjoyed Challengers. I thought it was great. I love the performances from all three of these people. I love the vibes and the energy. It feels like something that I'll rewatch multiple times as well. And when it lands on Prime Video, it's going to cause a conversation. I think it's going to be the Saltburn of the spring and the summer. Like, people are going to check this out. They're going to be like, yo, what the hell? Like, what is going on? What was that sequence about? Yo, this sauna sequence. Yo, this churro sequence. Like, what's going on? There's so many sequences and moments to talk about, and I think sometimes we need those. We need those films that'll activate the discourse and get people talking. You know, make that water cooler talk that we just don't get anymore out of movies because they just don't exist in that place in pop culture anymore. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the brand new film Challengers. If you check this out this past weekend, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.